Welcome to the S.O.A.P video series from Oak Tree Community Church in South Bend, Indiana. We have been working our way for several weeks now through the book of Ezekiel, and we're at the halfway point, starting the second half, and things get sort of fun from here. There's some pretty cool stuff.
See how you define fun here. So last week, and for the whole book, we discussed that Ezekiel became an object lesson, and he's representing what's happening in Jerusalem because he's really in Babylon.
Yeah.
And God told him the job was going to be tough, but last week God takes his wife away, and he tells Ezekiel, "Don't mourn her in public."
Yeah.
And the idea is, how do you translate that to Jerusalem? One way would be Jerusalem is going to be under siege. Everybody, in quotes, is going to die. You shouldn't mourn them because it's God doing it, and it's God doing it for His anger, for repayment for the sins.
Their judgment. They deserved it.
Yeah.
That's no one questions that, right?
Yeah. So God has left his temple and his house, and Israel is now under siege. And again, that happened last week. And the funny part is we are halfway through Ezekiel, and Jerusalem's under siege. It's like, what else could we possibly be talking about, right? Which is kind of the fun part that we were talking about. So for the next 7 chapters, we're going to be talking about other nations.
Which in other prophets, we see that all the time. But Ezekiel, we've gone through 24 chapters that has been dedicated only to Jerusalem and Judah, right? We haven't even really, other than, knowing that they're in Babylon, he's done no prophecy against any other nation out there. And so this is really sort of like, almost like a whiplash, like, whoa, complete change.
I kind of like it, though. I think there was 12 chapters on Jerusalem.
Changes it up a little bit.
Yeah, a little bit, yeah. But this is still part of God's judgment, right? God is judging against Jerusalem. He's taking care of business there first, and certainly he told us about it a number of times from a number of different angles. Now he's also taking care of the other nations that were involved with this, and for the reason.
Well, you remember not too long ago, Nebuchadnezzar had a choice between Jerusalem and Ammon, right? And of course, he chose Jerusalem. And I've said a couple of times, Ammon's still got its. Ammon's not off the hook, right?
They made it. They're going to make it to chapter 25.
They made it all the way to chapter 25. Finally, we have a prophecy against Ammon.
I do want to back up for 1 second. We keep hitting, then you'll know that I'm the Lord, over and over again. I think it's also appropriate to hit the Abrahamic covenant a little bit here. So the Abrahamic covenant said a number of things. One of the things that I think we gloss over sometimes is it says, "I will bless those who bless you, but the one who treats you lightly, I must curse."
Yeah.
If you take that at a national level, if a nation is against Israel, then you're against God too.
Right.
And not only that, but if you treat Israel lightly, God is going to curse you.
The traditional translation, "Those who bless you, I will bless; those who curse you, I will curse." But the two words for bless are exactly the same word, right? Bless is the same in both, but the word for curse is not the same. It's actually almost like opposite ends of the spectrum. And so the translation, though, if you treat them lightly, I will curse harshly, actually is a really important distinction there.
Yeah.
So,
and this is going to apply to these nations. So that's really the why.
Yeah.
And we'll see it over and over again.
Yeah.
In here. So in chapter 25, like you said, Ezekiel was told to turn towards the Ammonites and prophesize against them. It'd be kind of hard to, where are they now? They're about in this general direction.
Well, fun fact. So the first 3 here are Ammon, Moab, and Edom. Okay. 2 interesting things about them. Number 1, geographically, they're in modern-day Jordan, on the east side of the Jordan River, Dead Sea area. Okay? So that's number 1. Number 2, they are all related to Israel. Yeah. Because Ammon and Moab were the sons of Abraham's nephew Lot, and Edom was the family of Jacob's brother Esau. So these are, this is family.
Right.
And from the very beginning, you can go all the way back to the book of Exodus, Numbers, when Israel came out of Egypt. These people would not let Israel go through their land to get into the land of Canaan. And so even, all the way back there, last time we talked about Israel not doing, not following God all the way back then, these people have been against Israel from the very beginning.
Right.
So.
Right. So, was adding that to the fact that it says the Ammonites laughed when God's temple was desecrated,
Yeah.
when the land of Israel was made desolate and the house of Judah went into exile.
Yeah.
So as a result, God is going to destroy them.
Yeah.
And again, he says, then you will know that I am the Lord.
Yep.
So we know that the Babylonian army is going to come in and destroy the Ammonites. And God later says, around verse 10, that the Ammonites will no longer be remembered.
Yeah.
So now, you're destroyed, you're wiped off the face of this earth. No one's going to remember anything about you.
Yeah, if it weren't really for this or whatever, they don't exist anymore. There's as far as we know, any of these
Right.
these nations are really no longer in existence.
Yeah, so Moab is next. They said it looks like Judah is like other nations. And it seems okay, that's really not that big of a deal. But think about that from God's perspective, right? God had to give up. God chose to leave his house and give up Jerusalem because they weren't listening.
Yeah.
And to do that, now other nations are like, well, you're just like any other nation, right?
Yeah.
You worship a God with a small g, and now you're beat, just like every other nation. So how big is your God?
Yep.
So they're going to be handed over along with the Ammonites. We'll see to Babylon, and again, then they will know that I am the Lord.
Mm-hmm.
Edom helped King Nebuchadnezzar, and God held that against him, and they will experience his vengeance. So even though God is using King Nebuchadnezzar to his will, Edom used it to their advantage against Israel.
Yeah, and really all three of them, Ammon and Moab, did the same thing. Whenever it came time to take sides for or against Israel, they always sided with whoever happened to be the world power. Egypt, Assyria, Babylon, it didn't really matter. Whoever was the world power, that's who they sided with. So
in the Old Testament, the Philistines, they were always a problem for Israel. And because they continued to try to destroy Judah, God is going to let them kill Kertites?
Yeah, Karatites.
Mm-hmm. So these were the Philistines who actually migrated to Palestine from Crete. And it's also those on the seacoast.
Well, so again, geographically, if the first three are over on the east side in modern-day Jordan, Philistia is on the west side of Israel in what is today called Gaza. There's that little strip of land there, and they were seafaring people, right? And so really, that piece of land has always been a problem for Israel. Anybody who's lived there has always been a problem for Israel, and in this case, it was the Philistines. Some of them, they came over, like you said, from Crete, from the island, but they were right there on the Mediterranean Sea, and they were seafaring people. Yeah.
All right. Speaking of seafaring people, so the next 3 chapters are about Tyre.
Yeah.
Hopefully you remember who these guys are. So they were actually friends. I don't know if they were friends, but
had good business relationship.
Right, exactly. In the times of David and Solomon, and in fact, one of the first things Solomon did when he became king was reestablish at least the friendly letters that were traded between David and Tyre, and now Solomon and Tyre.
Yep.
And there was exchanging. It was beneficial to both.
Yeah. So we're going to, I'm just thinking geographically again. So we've done the east, we've done the west. Tyre and Sidon will show up here in a couple of chapters. They're in modern-day Lebanon. Okay, so now we've got the north side of Israel. So God's talking about people who are surrounding Israel. He's just going around the clock is what he's doing, right?
Right.
So now we're the north side, Tyre, right on the Mediterranean coast as well. Big seafaring people. I mean, huge. If we would call it a navy, but as far as merchants and everything, they were much more comfortable on the Mediterranean Sea than they were on land.
Right, and the north is important because you have them, then you have Israel, and then going south and west, to Egypt.
You get into Egypt and the rest of Africa. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. Right. And that's what Tyre wanted.
Yeah.
Right. So the problem was they wanted Israel gone because they were in the way for a trade route.
For the cedars and stuff, but a lot of that still would have gone
overseas,
down the sea. Yeah. In fact, it's funny because it's like the cedars that helped Solomon and everything. They just floated them down the coast, right? So they did. I mean, they were able to do some stuff over land, but again, they were very comfortable on the sea. Yeah.
I think they considered themselves that they couldn't be defeated, right? Because of that, right? They just go out on their boats.
Right.
God said that King Nebuchadnezzar would lay siege to them, destroy them, and throw them in the sea.
Well, the city of Tyre is interesting because it's actually sort of off the land. It's actually out into the sea a little bit. And so, almost a peninsula type thing is how so it was difficult to attack. Because there was only one, basically, little narrow thing, and they could get out and get away and everything, and so they thought that they were invincible, right? We can always get away. We're on the sea, and God's like, Nebuchadnezzar's just going to come in and knock you into the sea.
That's how big the army is, and they will only be a memory.
Yeah,
so God asked Ezekiel to compose a laminate for Tyre, so that. I got the definition: a passionate expression of grief or sorrow.
Yeah, basically write a sad song.
Right, because this nation is going away.
Yeah.
So the first part's about how beautiful Tyre is.
Yeah.
Borders on the sea, the builders have perfected their craft. It lists a number of countries where they got the best material from. Egyptian cotton. Even back then.
Yeah.
But these would have been the trading partners and the boats that went out, like you said. That really was their army or navy in this case. The next part lists all the trading partners and the things of value. And God says their wealth, the products, the merchandise, the sailors, the captains are all going to fall in the sea on the day of their downfall. And everybody's going to lament for Tyre. And interesting, when I read it, I went to the book of Revelation towards the end, and there's the fall of Babylon, and the fall of the commerce or the beast that falls, right? The machine that's going along, and these people are looking out over really all the wealth that went away. The captains are looking out and going, it was fun while it lasted.
Revelation 18 and Ezekiel 27, a lot of similarities there. Yeah, you're right.
It ends with Tyre will be no more. So then we get in chapter 28, and it's and we're only going to verse 19 for this week, and we really have two separate discussions here,
which is important.
Understanding
it. Yeah, absolutely.
Well, in the first, we find out Tyre's issue, and the issue, imagine this: that they were thought too much about themselves. But it's addressed to the Prince of Tyre, and we kind of talked about this. I think it was last week, where it was the Prince of Israel.
Yeah.
And I made too big of a deal out of it, saying, "Ooh, if who we would say is the king, God is considering the prince, then who's the real king?"
Yeah. And we do still see that here. It's the generic. The prince is the generic human ruler. We know he's a human because God specifically says, "Your heart is proud. You said, I'm a god. I sit in the seat of the god in the heart of the seas." You're a man, not a god. Just a reminder, little man, that you are a man.
Yeah. He does give him credit, though. He says they were wiser than David, and by wisdom they had amassed their fortune, and by their skill they increased it. So he did.
Well, not even
these guys were good.
Yeah, not even just them, but I think he's specifically talking to the king here, the ruler.
Oh, the ruler.
Yeah, specifically. Okay. I think he's pointing him out because he's going to make a parallel between the human ruler and the the supernatural
ruling.
backing
Yeah.
ruler, right? So you're wiser than Daniel. I mean, you are rich. You have everything going for you,
Right.
and yet,
Yeah.
Right.
I'm gonna wipe you out.
yeah,
So around verse 11 through verse 19, which is the end here, it changes.
yep,
So now Ezekiel's told to sing a song, a lament to the king of Tyre.
yeah,
But the description isn't about a human,
no,
right? So to me, so let's see. So I think it's got to be, well, it seems to be a supernatural king.
yeah, yeah. It's a reminder. It's a reminder that they're and we, this is not the only place we see this. We see this in Daniel 10. We see this in Ephesians 2. We see this in a lot of places where human governments have demonic leadership behind them.
Right.
Okay. Every human government, until Jesus comes, every human government is going to have demonic. This is what Paul called principalities and powers and the rulers of the rulers of darkness in spiritual places and that sort of thing. Right.
Okay.
So even the greatest human king of Tyre had some kind of demonic, or I think it's Satan himself,
Yeah.
behind him, empowering him, guiding him, whatever.
Yeah. So here's some reasons why Satan may be the choice here. It says you were in Eden.
Yep.
Every precious stone was your covering on the day you were created, and so on. So didn't say born, right? It
Right.
says created. So a created being was in Eden.
Yep. Which that king wasn't.
Yeah, right. I mean, we know Adam, we know Eve, we know God, and we know Satan were in Eden.
Yeah.
Obviously, it could have been others that
Right.
weren't listed, but so could have been Satan.
Yep.
So if it is Satan and we go down that road, we learn a lot. There's some interesting things that we didn't know that don't seem to be in other places.
Yeah.
That are here.
Well, specifically, he's called a cherub twice.
Yeah.
And we've run into cherubim here in Ezekiel,
Right.
chapters 1 and 10, and the description of them, obviously angelic beings, right? So we're talking about a supernatural, we're talking about
Right.
an angelic being here, and yet one that seems to be fallen because you were perfect from the day you were created until iniquity was found in you. Okay, so we have a fallen supernatural being.
Right.
It's not a human king. It has
Right.
to be.
It has to be something different.
Right.
The other thing that's cool is you have these precious stones that are his covering too. And I'm going to give him full credit because he told me this part. But this was years ago. But I remembered. And if you think of a snake or a serpent with scales, and now you replace that with gems that are layered one on top of another, you still have scales.
Yeah.
And that's kind of I never got that image out of my mind.
Well, and he's called in the Revelation. We've already talked about the book of the Revelation. He's called a dragon multiple
Right.
times.
Yeah, that old
He's
dragon.
called that ancient serpent, which is all the way back to Genesis 3. And so, yeah, we've got this dragonish, serpentine character. The cherubim that we saw earlier had human and animal faces, right? Characteristics. So why not dragonish also, right? Serpentine. I mean, it fits everything we've seen so far, and the language is just very clearly
Right. So it talks about if you compare Tyre's sins to Satan's, they seem to match up with each other, right? So I wasn't sure if God was using that as the example, just like Satan, this happened, or but if you read it figuratively or literally, not figuratively, you can come to the conclusion that Satan was running Tyre, and and Tyre had the same issues that Satan had, which they would.
Yeah, even if Satan himself wasn't running it, but he's called the king of Tyre here. So I mean, the king of Tyre. So
it doesn't mean he's there every day.
Oh, yeah, right. Yeah, but yeah, the similar, lots of similarities: the arrogance, the pride, the beauty, the wisdom, the whole thing. And just like Tyre's going to fall, Satan will fall. Right. He's already had one downfall, and he's going to have a few more in the future. So this takes us into the end times a little bit without giving us a lot of detail about the end times.
Right. But cool though. I mean, talk about a major shift away
That was
from
a huge shift.
yeah, Jerusalem.
Yeah.
So we're in here this week.
And I think it's one more good reminder that, yeah, we are shifting from away from Jerusalem, but all of these nations that we've just talked about were against Israel.
Right.
Satan's always been against Israel. So
Right.
anything that's anti-Semitic is ultimately
It goes back to him.
demonic and satanic in the background, whether you can see it or not. And I think that's what helps tie some of this together as well. So,
Nice.
well, hopefully it may be that this is the first time you've ever heard of that. So think through it, read through it, and ask questions, right? This is what this is about. We do Bible study, not just to read the Bible so that we can move on to the next chapter the next day, but so that we can actually learn what God has recorded and preserved here for us. And when we have questions, we should ask. Never let your question go unasked. So, yeah, read this, read it carefully, ask your questions, and we will pick up here halfway through chapter 28 next time.
Bye, everybody.